Hello, hello, and welcome to Rome Howl, a podcast with inspiring talk and stories about exceptionally talented people. I'm Jennifer Gardner, your host.
That journey right there of being able to go, okay, things weren't as I want them. Now I want them to be this way. And so I'm going to process through that, whether it's with a therapist or taking the leap. I've always wanted to go to Europe. Or, someone's been a doctor for years and they realize they don't feel called to serve in that way anymore. To take the leap and go, okay, am I ready to rewrite that storyline, that belief system, that impact into something different and move with it? And that's where the risk comes. That's where the stepping out comes, is accepting the story that's been, that we can't change it. We can't go back and undo a story that's been written. But instead, it's a line in our life. And taking that storyline and weaving it with a new storyline. Weaving it with a storyline that's new and may feel uncomfortable. In the discomfort, we gain clarity. And in the discomfort, we gain the ability to give more.
Welcome to the next episode of Rome Howl. It is August 17, 2017, and this is episode number 19. On the show today, I'm going to play my interview with Carly Palady. We recorded this back in July, and I chose to publish Carly's episode today because there's a heaviness in the air in light of what happened a few days ago in Charlottesville and also in Barcelona this morning. I'm not a professional broadcaster, so when I have to be on and record a podcast or an introduction to a podcast, it's really challenging if I'm upset. I mean, I can surmount it, but when there's a heaviness in the air because of what's happening in the world, or there's been tragic or horrific events which has happened in the past few days, like way too much. And when I feel overwhelmed, it's really difficult to jump on my computer and record the interview. But the show must go on, as they say, and the people that help me make this show need to have my delivery to them of the materials for this interview, like today. So I have to pull it together and record this. So I share that because, in all honesty, this is supposed to be an inspiring show, and I don't feel very inspired right now. I feel sad and shocked and disgusted by the violence and the tensions, not just in the United States, but also in the rest of the world. And it's affecting me greatly. So in light of that, I decided to release an interview with a person who is personally very special to me. We talk about our relationship during the interview. And also, she's just this bright, shining light in my life and in other people's lives. And her work is all about helping people identify their gifts and hone their transformational messages and build programs that will help others in a powerful, positive way. And she's got the most fascinating background. She's a teacher, she's a therapist, and she used to be a bus driver. She's been so many things. I don't want to summarize the interview in my introduction. I really want you to listen to it and be delighted and as you discover who she is. Her name is Carly Palady, and Carly and I have been working together since, I guess, the spring, probably in March of this year, and she has helped me write 2 curriculum of programs that I intend to launch this fall in order to serve people in ways other than just being a lawyer, because I can certainly be a lawyer any day of the week, but because of my skills as an attorney, I'm uniquely qualified to do other things as well. And so Carly has helped me identify what those things are, and soon I'm going to be offering them to you. In fact, Carly and I are even going to do a workshop together in November where we combine our talents and our forces to offer some education to people who are looking to grow their businesses. And my focus is going to be on marketing and messaging and communication and persuasion and influence, which is my jam. So in any event, I am going to stop talking and just let you listen to the Carly Palady interview. It's the perfect day for this because Carly has such beautiful, loving energy, and she's an uplifting person. So anyway, in light of recent events and in order to inspire and uplift all of us, I'm going to let you listen to my conversation with Carly Palady. Hey, Carly Palady.
Jennifer.
How are you doing?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm doing much better. Now that, off this podcast, we had a huge heart-to-heart talk about all the stuff that's going on. And I'm really excited to have this podcast call with you.
Me too.
Because I think you have an incredibly exciting work that you're doing that's starting to catch on like wildfire. And I'm just really happy to help you bring that message further. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It is an absolute honor. I'm really excited to be here with you today.
So I think the first thing that we need to do is have you tell the listeners the work you're doing now.
Okay. Well, with pleasure. I mean, it's just been, I wake up every day going, is this my life? Are these the people I'm working with? Because they're all so transformational and they have so much to put out into the world. And it's really a blessing. I mean, I don't even feel like it's work as much as it is this transformational message going out. And all that they do is so different and unique. And so it's like little shoots of light and positivity going out and affecting people in all different ways.
Oh my God. Can I have that, please?
Yes, you can. So I'm a coaching consultant and I help joyful visionaries, coaches, other consultants really leverage their gifts and their talents into profitable online programs and businesses so that they can get their message out into the world in a very joyful, easy way that doesn't feel slimy and feels transformational, impactful. I'm a therapist by trade. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and mental health provider as well. And so this really was an extension of working with people therapeutically for the last 7 years and seeing the number one core issue coming up of I don't feel like my life is where I want it to be, and I don't feel like I'm doing the work I'm meant to do. And digging in with that with them and them going, well, now that I know what I'm supposed to do, how do I go out and do that? How do I get that message out into the world? How do I actually impact people and work with people and see their lives changed? The how. That's where people struggle. They can voice the message. They can get to the point where they understand this is what I have to offer, and this is why I'm so excited to work with other people or, to go be another counselor, to be a teacher. But how do I figure out how to do that? What steps to take? And if they want to get their message online, how to do that, especially when you're, in your 30s like I am. My generation grew up with dial-up. So for us to learn to get online, it takes a few more steps than somebody who's, in their 20s and they grew up already dialed in, so to speak.
Right. Well, I know it's really, really hard to conceptualize how the stuff that lives online actually gets there. And then there are a lot of tools and there's so much choice that it can be really overwhelming. Like, how do I use these tools? Which tool is going to be best for me, and how do I work with it so that I can get my message out there? But yeah, it is so incredibly overwhelming to get the message out, and you have helped me so much to break it down into digestible pieces so that I can do it. First, to get the ideas out of my head, and then now we're at the stage where we're actually mapping out, and you call it mapping, what the components are of what I can teach.
And it's been amazing to work with you. I mean, like I said, I wake up and I'm like, these are my clients. This is what I'm doing. And seeing you, take the idea that you have and actually laying it out into a protocol and a formula that you can offer people to transform their lives and help them get their multi-talented creative energy and work out and get out of feeling burnt out and overwhelmed. I mean, that whole process is immensely special. I mean, there's many people that wake up and go, oh, it's Monday.
Yeah.
I'm not happy.
Yeah.
and to get to a place of really understanding how to pull it out and create an action plan to be happy again. It's invaluable. It's amazing. I love working with you.
Well, it's really super mutual. But one of the things that I find, well, I seem to attract to me advisors, mentors, teachers, the ones that I resonate with anyway, are the ones that have like a real solid background rooted in education and experience. And then they can go on from that to create something that may be a little bit more unconventional in the message or unconventional in the technique. And then I find I really do well in that space. But one of the reasons why I think your work is so amazing is because, your background is really multi-dimensional because you have so many different talents and you're able to bring all of those to the way that you work with me. So let's get into that a little bit because it is quite fascinating. You've had a bunch of different jobs and careers.
Yes.
And I think let's start at the very beginning. Like, what was your first job?
It's fun to talk to you about this. People laugh. I was a landscaper. So I was 15 years old, and I think I lied to tell them I was 16. I wanted a job so badly. I can't remember, but I just remembered I got paid under the table like a lot of us did back then. And I was working for this corporate landscaping company, and I was horrible at gardening. And they said, we're going to teach you to mow and prune and edge. And so that's all I did for a summer. And I did that for about a year. I grew up in a small town, so we all, knew each other's name, knew who stayed out late, knew who got home on time. The cops would stop you and go, how's your day going? Can I give you a ride home? It was very, very small town USA and tight knit. Everybody knew everybody, and that's a blessing and a curse in itself. So,
oh, yeah.
So there was a little consignment store downtown, and she was revamping into a cafe, and she was going to do jazz nights and like high-end coffee and pastries and tarts. And so I was just turned 16 and I offered to work for her for minimum wage. I just told her I want to be a part of what you're doing. It's so creative. It's so amazing. And that probably sounded weird back then, but she hired me and I got trained to be a barista by Batdorf and Bronson. So like not your normal push button, but actually tamping cups. And then jazz for 8 years. And so she contracted with me to sing on Saturdays and then to help her make all the pastries and the cookies and the coffees before the show. So I'd run the till and run making lattes and cappuccinos and all of that and help get in early in the morning and do the baking with her. And then I would sing for a couple hours and then I would help her bus tables. And I did that for, 6 years.
Wow.
It was, became this little local hub of eclectic high-end coffee and music. And then we did art openings. And so I loved art too. And so I started drawing and doing charcoal, and she let me exhibit my art in the cafe and people bought it, which was really, for a 17-year-old at that point, it was really amazing to have someone buy your art. And I decided at that point that I wanted to go into art therapy or art education. So kept singing jazz, like worked in cafes in college, went to Western Washington University and sing jazz and make coffees and paint to pay for school. I worked at REI, leading hiking and tours and things like that.
Amazing.
So I was working a lot. And so then I got into education. I was a Spanish major. I'm bilingual. And I had 2 minors in sociology of, you're going to laugh, sexuality and family, and teaching English through art.
Huh.
And so that's where I ended up. And my family was sort of like, what are you doing with your life? You're a Spanish major with art therapy teaching minor and a minor in sex. And I said, yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly. So
Right.
At that point, it was 2006, and there was an opportunity, if you were bilingual, I could take a teaching externship in Punta Arenas, Chile, which is on the Strait of Magellan, all the way down at the tip of Chile. So, I didn't know if I'd come back, and I wouldn't recommend people ever do this, but I was a single female and bought a one-way ticket, which means they probably thought I was a drug mule. Because that's how I was treated.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So I went on a one-way ticket to Chile, and I started
Wow.
teaching down there in these private schools. I taught English, And they let me, they kind of let me play because it's hard to get people from the US down there to teach. A lot of the English teachers are actually natives. So I taught and I did art. I did teaching English through art, these subclasses that people would stay after for. We had conversation classes. I taught them how to sing American jazz.
Wow.
And so that point that I moved over and went to Argentina for a few weeks, and I sat in these hostels singing and got money so I could travel some more, and came back and finished my externship, came back and graduated. Do you want me to keep going? It's a very weird story.
I love weird stories.
So I came back, and where was that? 2006. Graduated in 2007. Continued working with REI. I do adore them. It's an amazing cooperative company. And there was this opportunity to go to Alaska and the Yukon in Canada and run tours where you're actually driving the bus, which is a 50,000-pound luxury tour bus. I started this bus training my last year of school, told my parents, I'm going to go live up north for a couple of years and drive buses because I want to travel. And my mom said, well, when are you going to get a real job? And I said, I have a real job. I'm going to make coffees, live in Alaska, sing jazz, and figure myself out.
Well, you know what? I mean, that sounds like you already had it figured out because that's an amazing combination of things. Does it get any better than that? I mean, it's the simplicity of you occupying yourself with things that you loved doing in a place that was beautiful, that you wanted to do it in. I mean, isn't that what it's all about?
Yeah. And I was so lit up. I mean, it was the hardest summer of my life because I was working like 80 hours a week.
I'm sure.
But I'll never forget, one of my favorite points is I had a tour bus full of people, and we were up in the Yukon near Dempster Highway, which if anyone's ever watched Ice Road Truckers, they go across that road. And part of it freezes over in the summer on the lake, and you actually drive across the lake. So this was the summer, so I was on the summer reroute. And you're driving it, and it's a single-lane highway. And there's all these species up there that aren't found anywhere else in the world. Wow. And there's all these different types of fir trees. There's a fir tree there that's 7,000 years old. There's all these different species of fox and animals that we got to see all over the place. And you're driving through a 40,000-year-old Arctic tundra where the ground in some place is still frozen from that far back, that it never, ever thaws. So I lived there off the White Path Railway and toured. We had about 5 pages of tour material to memorize and stories to tour people and take them through these excursions. And I think the crux point of moving into becoming a therapist out of this was I was hiking up to Upper Dewey, which the Dewey brothers helped found the city. And at the top, there was a large Arctic lake. And then above that is another Arctic lake that's above that, a waterfall that comes down and cascades down. You could drink right out of it. And as I got up there, my roommate at the time, she was like, well, let's skinny dip in the lake. I'm like, are you crazy? She goes, no, we've got wool on. We'll just take the wool off and put it back on. We'll be fine. So we did. But it was one of those points where we got out of the lake, we're sitting there getting dressed, and we're looking out because we're 4,000 feet up over Skagway. And you can see all the mountains, the glaciers, you can see everything. This is one of those existential points where we're supposed to ask, what do we want to do with our lives?
Right.
And I said, yeah, I know. Because it took us like 4 hours to get up here, and our legs burned, and the cold was really great for it. She's like, what do you want to do with life? And I said, well, I love teaching. But I said, the whole time we've gone up here, we've been talking about how unhappy people are. So many people stay in a job and have said, oh, I'm on this trip to Alaska, but I wish I could live here. I wish I could come do what you're doing. I wish I could do this. I got to go back to work on Monday, so I got to get back on the boat and go back down to Seattle.
Right.
And so touring these tours, people are always talking about how I wish I would have done what you're doing when I was your age. I wish I would have taken this trip. I wish I would have, you get to know your passengers really well when they're stuck with you for 4 days, and each day's 8 hours in a bus touring the Yukon. So they would tell me their stories, and it became this traveling story bus. And it was just said, I felt just so blessed. I spent with thousands of people, them telling me their stories as I told them my stories. The biggest theme out of these stories was regret.
Yes.
I wish I had. And it still kind of gets me choked up because I remember one of my last tours saying goodbye and letting people know this is my last tour. I'm heading back home. And I was almost engaged at that point, so I was actually heading home. to ask my parents if it was okay if he married me. And we ended up breaking up and I met my husband. That's a whole nother story, but it was for the best. But I remember I told everybody before I left, as you get back on the train to go home, you've just been on an adventure, a story process. I want you to go home and capture this, write it out, take pictures, make scrapbooks. Don't let the busyness get in the way of capturing this story. And almost all of them, we were crying. We'd been together 7 days. That was the longest tour I'd done. And it came back to that. I wish I had done what you're doing. And I said, you still can't. Who says you can't take a summer off your job and come up? Who says when you're done with your job and you're in transition from another, that you can't go down to South America?
Right.
There's nobody saying, I mean, I know there's responsibility, but if you're changing jobs, since then, I've always taken a month off between job changes. I've saved enough strategically so that I knew when I was going to make a career move that I would take a month off. And I would always take that time to write that story or to imprint that story and to figure out how that story impacted my life. Because you don't know if you have tomorrow.
That's true. We don't know that. You really took everyone in that bus on a journey, like a personal journey, not just through the Yukon, but on a personal journey.
When you're traveling and you're doing these stories, you're telling the gold rush story of how these people gave up everything, walked, or however they did it back then, from New York and the East Coast over to Seattle, which Seattle's actually where the gold rush started. San Francisco and Seattle were two separate time periods, the gold rush era in the 1880s into 90s. And so people went to Seattle and they filled up to go to Alaska. And there were 7 different ways to the gold fields in Dawson City. But it was really that existential sacrifice of uprooting your entire livelihood to go chase a dream where the newspaper's delivering the news of where you're going 4 months behind. Meaning if there was crisis or tragedy there, people didn't know until they got there. So there was this risk, this risk of moving up these mountains, the risk of 70% of people dying before they ever made it, giving up everything to hike by foot over 3,000 miles when only about 10% ever found gold. And it was the complete spirit of the entire journey of actually taking the time to make the journey and take the risk, not knowing the outcome, knowing the journey was worth it. So when I got into those stories and actually giving the stories of the people, their lives, and how they made that trip and they gave up everything to go for gold because they thought it was going to be the answer to what their families needed for stability to get out of poverty, that always hit a nerve with people. And then they would start telling me their stories, their journeys, what they had given up in their lives, where they had moved, why they had done it. And we're stuck together for 8 days. It was amazing.
Okay, so you met a man you became engaged to, ultimately did not marry, decided to become a therapist as a result of that work. So you practiced as a therapist. Tell us more about what happened after you started doing that.
So I came back and he and I, we'd almost gotten engaged. He was coming back to ask my family and it just feel right. So I came back, I was working for the Quit Smoking line in Washington, doing cognitive behavioral therapy to help people quit smoking. And I fell in love with that because when you get people out of a block and actually free of something that's really holding them back, either emotionally, physically, or financially, they start talking about all the things they now want to do. So applied for graduate school for master's in teaching because I thought I wanted to go teach storytelling. And then I realized what teachers deal with in the United States, and teaching English overseas, it's politically very different. So went and worked with AmeriCorps, working with child homelessness and working with youth that were on the streets, literally sitting down with them and going, okay, how do you want to work your life around this? How do you want to move forward out of homelessness and actually start moving forward the way you want to? So did AmeriCorps and then to graduate school for my master's in social work. I started as a therapist, as a school counselor, and just working with youth, doing mental health counseling and school counseling with these different middle schoolers. Then I got a job at the VA. And I worked as a PTSD therapist for a year, doing cognitive processing therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy. And I got out and went in to be a mental health provider for kids in the hospitals. So going in and doing those initial assessments when people are having very acute mental health breaks, or a lot of times their first initial break. And finally got back to working for the federal government, which is actually where I'm at now in addition to my practice, and I adore it. So that is where I'm at now. And in the practice, a lot of it kind of goes back to story, even if I'm, working with a family with someone who's dying, kind of capturing that story and talking to them about how to emulate that story with when they're in hospice. I do basic medical, we do brief solution focused therapies, and just usually I get people when they're at a crisis point. So that's the work I do during the day. And I started my business 3 years ago helping people map out their lives and apply for school and jobs and career counseling, essentially helping people decide, okay, I hate my life. What do I want to do with myself? And as I did that, I got into program development working for the universities. So we started mapping out their programs based on all of their research. And that was the light bulb moment. This is really what I'm doing. So I hired a coach in October of this year to help me actually put this into a business, because I thought, this is what I want to do. So why am I not doing it?
Right.
Got a coaching certificate, started mapping my process, and then I started marketing it February of this year. And so it really is a combination of my teaching background, my therapy background, and the program mapping educational consultation background that I have wrapped into a coaching business to help people take their ideas and their stories and leverage those talents into profitable programs that they can sell online and transformational journeys that they can bring their clients through to get the most results. And I met people like you, and I really can't see any more blessed way to be right now. It's fabulous.
Yes. I mean, it's amazing how we have, like, in personal ways, we have a very similar background. And then in our career paths are sort of different, but we do have the heavy educational artillery behind us to sort of back up this new work that we're doing. What I'm really interested in that I hear you say is the whole fascination with story. I'd love you to talk a little bit about why you think story is such an important feature of the work that you have done and are doing now.
I think when we born and we grow up, a lot of trauma and a lot of difficulty, at least with my counseling clients, goes back to their childhood story. What happened and what they didn't receive, and what events that happened that imprinted. And then when we get into a creative place, when a lot of them went to college, to school, moved out, they all have these stories of how they started finding their way. I have clients that have said, I backpacked around Europe. I went to Alaska, similar to what I did, these periods of processing that people did to get to where they're at, or periods that they didn't do. I have people that their story comes from a broken place or a whole place, but their regrets are the stories that they didn't take. And the mindset over, well, I'm already established, or I've already got my career, I've got my family, like that opportunity to write that story is gone. I had a client that said, well, I really wanted to go live in Thailand for a month. And I said, well, you're freelance. Does your spouse work? And he goes, no. I'm like, why don't you just go do it? Is she open to moving to do it? You could rent your apartment out. He goes, oh my gosh, I could do that. She'd be up to it. I'm like, well, so a lot of times people get stuck in the storyline from childhood and from growing up, or from traumatic events that happened to them. And they can go back to that. And that's where therapy can be really helpful, is to work that story into a place where they can move forward from that story. But for positive storylines too, like for me, it was going down to South America was a really positive story. It was a time to process, is looking at the process. How did that experience impact you? Why did it impact you that way? And what did it teach you? And that point right there of what did it teach you? What did you get from it? That's knowledge that other people don't always have. So when you take your stories and you weave those teaching experiences together, you're left with a way to inspire and impact people and change and become a change agent, because you've had these experiences that nobody else has had because they're you, but you're able to accept the parts that aren't always beautiful, and you're able to accept the parts that are, and to turn that into a transformational tool.
A transformational tool that can also transform others.
Right. Because of accepting the story. Like if I'll give you an example. If someone has a traumatic childhood, or even just not a great childhood, like they might say, oh, my parents worked all the time. We never spent a lot of time as a family. That's a story. And you can't go back and undo what happened in childhood. You can't go back to that child and say, let's redo it. Let's get your parents really engaged. You can't go back. It's done. Time has passed. But in accepting that that happened, then the pivot comes, okay, because of that experience, if it's really impacting somebody, what do they want their lives to look like now? There's so many people that live in this stagnancy, this in between, this day by day, paycheck to paycheck feeling of I'm not fulfilled. I don't like my life. I'm not excited for Monday. It's a disconnection at the core level of what they're supposed to do, but their confidence has been affected by the stories that they've experienced. So it's then taking the experiences to those stories and saying, okay, it was, but it's not who I am. So who are they? And going through that deep delve process, whether they need to travel to do that, but really pulling out, who am I? And what do I have to give to the world? What do I have to teach? What would that impact do for others? And right there, that creates a purpose in other people's lives, and then it gives back to the storyteller. Because they're giving to others, they're giving back to, they're paying it forward. And when that other person feels gifted, when that other person receives that blessing, then they feel like they have to pay it forward. And then you start that whole idea of pay it forward because somebody else has given into their lives. There's a coach online, I can't remember her name. She's the mom that does the funny videos about how kids should be and is usually in a bathtub drinking wine or eating ice cream. I think her name is Kathy Kravnick. I'd have to look it up again, but she's hilarious and she's all over Facebook and on Oprah. After she got divorced, she ended up almost homeless, very broke on food stamps in a small apartment with her kids. And her story goes back to feeling completely tired, exhausted, depressed, and having no money to really go out and do anything. But she wanted to give back. And so she ended up putting up her apartment and buying food on food stamps to feed whoever came through the door on Wednesday nights. And through that process, she realized like when those people were so grateful for the food, some had not eaten for weeks. And yet she was feeding them on her food stamps. And no idea that a meal could make that kind of impact on somebody. And that's the crux of this is so many people think, well, to be anything, I've got to be like Tony Robbins or Oprah, or I've got to be on TV, or I've got to have a book, or I've got to have, you just have to open your heart and your home in some form to others. Whether it's sitting down at the coffee table with a neighbor that just lost their parent, or it's walking into a store and helping a store owner stock shelves because they've got a bad back. I mean, it really just comes into giving. And when we get into that point of giving and seeing, how can I help somebody today? We stop making it about ourselves. We make it about, I wonder who's going to cross my path today. And I wonder what their story is. I wonder how I can help them. Because when you get to that point, usually people will turn around and say, thanks for the coffee. Or, thank you so much for this. I'm going to pay for hers. And it becomes this process instead of not focusing on what we don't have, focusing on what we can give.
Yeah. That's a beautiful paradigm. The first time that happened to me in line at Starbucks, I was blown away. The cashier said to me, well, that person just paid for your drinks and your snacks, so don't worry about it. I'm like, what? I was so shocked. Then I was like, well, where did they go? Because I wanted to thank them. They were gone. And it was beautiful. And it really uplifted me. It was incredible how much it uplifted me. I like to do things like leave a $5 bill on a counter in a public restroom.
Thank you for doing that. That's awesome.
That's kind of fun.
And somebody gets so excited over that $5. It's just the excitement that they found something they didn't have. They tapped into what they didn't have.
Yeah. I like to think about how that might have improved somebody's day that day. I love the way that you have conceptualized your work around the concept of stories. I think that, stories, they're everywhere and they're so important. And it's through telling them and understanding them that we connect more. And there are through lines in every story that are just related to the fact that we're all human. And when you can get people who don't think in terms of story to open their eyes and see that, that's how we all connect more deeply with each other, because we realize, you know what, we're all dealing with the same stuff.
Right.
All of us. And so now you're helping people write these programs so that they can take their stories and transform them and deliver them as a service where they're helping other people using those stories out in the world.
Right. And whether it's their educational background, like I've had clients that are doctors, lawyers, digital forensic specialists. I have an HR rep I'm working with a therapist.
Mm.
They've all got a different impact. Like, and I have people that come in with just management stories. Like, I'm amazing at managing people, but not everyone succeeds in that area. I'm going to create a program for coaches and consultants on how to become the boss in your business, how to manage, how to understand legal schmeagle and HR policies, and how to write all those pieces to have a full-fledged managed business, how to manage people. And instead of someone having to take a management class and pay thousands, they can take a coaching program with a person who's already established as a coaching consultant and knows the implementation. So then they're walking their clients through a process, a protocol of how to do this. Here's step 1, step 2, step 3. And that gives so much confidence to the client because they know if I work with this person, I'm getting this step-by-step guide to make my life better. And it's all out of their stories and their strengths. That person got to that point because of their stories and their strengths. And so it helps their clients create their business to get their stories and their strengths.
So let me ask you, what would you say is the biggest challenge that you've had to face and overcome to get to be where you're at today doing this kind of work?
Oh, that is a big question. Personally, the cerebral palsy in my legs. And I was one of the kids growing up that was hard, gump girl, pushed over, walk straight. So you have a point when you're experiencing something like that where you either get depressed or you get mad. And I got mad. And so I started attending therapies, and I had a short-term learning disability called tolerance fatigue. And so if I read something, I didn't remember it right away. So I'd have to rewrite everything I read into these short steps so that I would be able to teach it. But I couldn't read something and remember it the first time. I can't still. Like, I can't look at something and remember it. I have to write it out. So the biggest challenge was school. I did really well. I graduated 4th in my class and had a 4.0. It wasn't academically that I couldn't succeed, but it was that if my friend studied a test for 4 hours, it took me 18 because I had to rewrite everything I textbooks that was mandatory for the test into my own words, steps, and bullets to be able to take the test. So when I graduated from college, I had literally 4 tubs of notebooks. And my poor husband, when we moved, goes, "What is all of this?" I'm like, "Those are my notebooks. Don't touch them." And he goes, "What do you mean?" He's like, "There's thousands of notes in here. Why don't you just keep your textbooks?" And I never told him. It just wasn't something I needed to tell the world. I struggle with this. It was just, that's how I learned how to adapt. And I said, "Well, those are all my rewritten textbooks." And he goes, "You rewrote your books?" I'm like, "I have to in order to implement information." And I still go to therapy for my legs. I actually love massage. Who wouldn't, right?
Yeah.
No, I can't run more than a couple miles without the pain shooting through my body. And I just, at the point, I don't care anymore. I can't change my body. It is what it is. And with my mind, I realized the mapping that I went through to write out my notes with my disability has become my most favorite part of my life now. Someone can bring a concept to me and go, "I can't figure this out." I'm like, "Oh, let's map it out. 1, 2, 3, we're done."
You know what, though, Carly? You know what? I think it's true for a lot of people. There is a magic that happens when you put a pen in your hand and a piece of paper in front of you, and you take your ideas and you write them stream of consciousness on the page. There's magic in that, and it activates something in the brain. And I think that it allows us to more effectively learn. That is how I became a good student. I wrote out everything because it forced me to focus. Right. I couldn't quite hear the name of that so-called learning disability that you say you have where you need to write in order to learn. What is it called? Because you were cutting out again.
It's called Tolerant Reading Memory and Decoding Comprehensional Disorder, so DEC TFM. But the interesting part is they told me you should never have been able to learn. So I'm like, okay, well. And so the really neat thing is I went through all these research studies with the universities growing up because of my disabilities in the 80s was sort of new and research was newer. And so one thing they said is your brain is a little bit backward. So I just want to encourage people, if you have a disability of any form, it's not a part of you that's broken. It's a part of you that's mapped differently. And it's figuring out how to work with that map and how to follow that map and embrace the map and utilize the map, because it's almost like they said I have to look back at the statistic, but it's almost like 60% of the population, some form of disorder or disability in some way, cognitively or physically, something is, and that's the point. We're not perfect. We're perfectly imperfect. We're just imperfect. Our faces aren't symmetrical biologically either. Like, we're not perfect, and we can't be perfect. And there's this message out there to be perfect house, the perfect career, the perfect spouse, blah, blah, blah. But the jobs aren't perfect, bosses aren't perfect, and life is not perfect. So why do we hold ourselves to that standard? Why not just accept we're all mapped differently? That storyline runs within our mapping. We utilize our skills and strengths to fit culture, society, and other people. And if you want to build businesses, build it because that's what you're good at.
I love that. That's a great message. And, your message and your teachings has helped me so much. And you're not finished. I'm not letting you quit. Not yet. Yeah. So let me ask you, what are you the most proud of in your life?
My relationship with God and my family. My husband and I have been together 10 years this year. And I think I'm most happy that we've always supported each other as best we could and known that life wouldn't be perfect, that we were going to embrace it imperfectly, and just working as best we can as two flawed, never perfect people to have the best life we could. We only see each other like 3 days a month. So we've been together 10 years like that.
Maybe that's why.
We don't see each other, right? So we never knew we'd be apart like this, but we ended up starting our relationship out apart. So I think healthy relationships, when we go to sleep at the end of the day, our education, our business, our life really doesn't, none of that matters. Our family is what matters. Our faith is what matters. Like, that's what we die with. That's what we go home to, our relationships. And on a therapeutic level, I really encourage people, when you're out on dates and spending time with people, turn your phone off, put it down. Yeah. Because, we actually have the higher depression rates today than we did 10 years ago. And one of the largest factors that people talk about now in therapy is isolation. Right. That we're online, but we're isolated offline because we're online. Right. And if anything, I just want people to be happier in their relationships, have more connections, build more friendships. If someone online lives in your city and you're formed a great relationship, ask them for coffee. Go hang out with them in person.
Yeah. What's the riskiest thing you've ever done aside from driving a huge commercial vehicle filled with passengers in their 50s over some ice sheath?
Oh, what's the riskiest thing I've ever done? That probably is. That was pretty scary at times. The roads up there are really dangerous. Yes. And it's a 50,000-pound bus that, takes a football field to stop. So you hit a moose jumps out in front of you, you're going to hit it, because if you try to stop, you're going to crash. So, that was scary. That was probably the riskiest in terms of driving. The second time I came back, I didn't feel called. I had a contract in Honduras to go down and teach in Honduras and Colombia. And I came back and I had a plane ticket and everything set up. And I really felt called to stay home. And I didn't have a job. I had anywhere to live. But I just didn't feel it in my heart that I should be going back. And so I canceled everything and moved into my parents' garage, which at 23 was a little embarrassing. And I paid them rent. And then I moved out a month later, moved in with these Brazilian foreign exchange students without a job and just these savings from traveling and working in Alaska. You make good money there because you can't work more than 9 months a year because of the cold. So I had savings. I moved in. I went back to REI, and I met my husband 2 weeks later. So I canceled everything on a whim, which was, a little crazy, actually, looking back, and just lived in people's garages until I moved in with the Brazilians and taught them English in exchange for help with rent.
Oh, my goodness. You could have made them coffee, too, I suppose, and sung jazz.
I took them to jazz cafes. That was part of I called it our acculturation. I took them to jazz cafes. I took them to good coffee places, and they took me to these Brazilian dance halls and tried to teach me to dance, which it was really funny, but they didn't know and they couldn't figure out why I kept getting off beat. But I was like, oh, screw it. I'm just going to dance.
Good for you. So what does success mean to you? How do you define that for yourself?
Oh, I've never had anyone ask me that before. You are good.
Well, thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Oh, wow. I think it's getting to a place where we openly accept who we have been and what we weren't, move forward with the determination to know that we're going to make the best of our lives in service to others and the betterment, the communities and the people that surround us, whatever that looks like for somebody.
And what does that look like for you?
Doing this work.
Good for you.
It's the scariest thing I've ever done, to put myself out online, to be honest, and to do live streams and run up Facebook ads and trying to figure out the online world, 'Cause I think success for me will be starting a book and maybe a speaking tour at some point to really encourage people to step out into who they feel called to be and the people they feel called to serve, and stop sitting and stop sitting in what ifs and I regrets, because the world deserves people's messages and people's stories, because we deserve to be connected. And we can only do that if we're focused on what we're creating, planning, and what we're making happen. And so I just tell anyone, take action, take one step a day. You don't have to climb Mount Everest in 30 seconds because you can't. But what can you do today to get closer to that goal you've really, really wanted to accomplish?
Amen, sister.
Amen.
That was beautiful. Really, you're beautiful.
Oh, you are too. It's just been so much fun. I
Yeah.
can't even believe this is our world. The
Right?
people listening, this is the world. Like,
This is
these are
the
the
world.
opportunities we have. Like, a lot of people ask me, didn't you start out with a lot of money? No, I paid for my way through grad school. Like, I had like $1,000 in my bank when I got back from Alaska. Like, I've never started out with money in that way. It's just the strategy of, are you willing to work 60 hours one week in a coffee shop and then go sing jazz at night and drive a bus? And I'm serious. Like, I have a lot of 20-year-olds that just ask me questions online. Like, how did you get here? What do I need to do? And I'm pretty honest with them. Like, if you don't have the funds, get really creative. I don't know if I want to do that. And that's where it stops. Like, people have got to be willing to sit out and do unconventional things to get the funds they need to make their dreams happen. As uncomfortable as it is, they'll happen if we conventionally go after it.
Well, on that happy note, I'm going to say goodbye to you, just for the day, of course, because we talk all the time, like many times a day in various platforms.
I know.
But that is a beautiful, everything about you. Okay. I'm just a huge fan. I can't help it. I'm gushing. I can't help it.
I'm a huge fan of yours, so I'm just excited to be on your journey.
Yay. And I want to invite anybody who's listening to have the opportunity to contact you should they feel the desire. So where can people find you? And of course, all of this is going to be listed in the show notes at romehowell.com. But Carly, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Sure. You can find me at www.carlypalady.com, and that's CarlyPalady. It's like a PA and lady. So they can find me there, or they can find me on my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/map your joy.
Map your joy. Well, you certainly helped me map my joy. So thank you. I will be eternally grateful for everything you do and everything you are. Okay, I feel so much better now having listened to Carly. I hope that whenever anybody here listens to Carly, I hope that they enjoy it as much as I enjoyed speaking with Carly. Also, there will be more information coming out about the workshop that Carly and I are going to be doing in November, where she's going to be teaching her techniques for developing a transformational message into a program that you can sell online. And I'm going to be teaching how do you actually message about that and advertise and market that online. So if you're interested in receiving information about that, you can email me at romehowell@gmail.com, or you can go on the website and subscribe so you will get updates about that there. The website is romehowell.com. And if you enjoy the show, I would really appreciate it if you would go to iTunes and leave a review and rate the show. And also, if you ever have any questions that you would like me to ask or people that you would like me to interview, feel free to send me an email at romehowell@gmail.com and let me know what your comments are, and I'll do my best to answer your emails. So thanks again for listening, and have a great day or a great night or a great whatever, wherever you are when you hear this podcast. That's it for this episode of Rome Howl. Rome Howl is produced in Los Angeles, California, with production support and editing services by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios in Chicago. I'm Jennifer Gardner. Feel free to leave me your comments and suggestions for stories you would like to hear, people you would like me to talk to, questions you would like me to ask. You will find me at Rome Howl on Facebook and at Jen B. Gardner on Twitter and at romehowl.com, where you can email me and sign up to hear the podcast every week. I really look forward to receiving your questions and your feedback and your requests. I'm grateful, and it's a lot of fun to be able to talk to you this way. So thanks again for listening, and take care.